process. The benchmarks come out again of the HRSA Model Trauma System Plan that was published by the Health Resources and Services Administration, sort of as their swan song, in 2006. Unfortunately, even though the legislation was reauthorized, it has not been appropriated for the past several sessions of Congress, so it is a program in name but without any resources. That program, again, helped keep things moving in the states across the country. Each state got a very small pittance, but for some, that $50,000 every year was all they had to put towards trauma and EMS system development. So the loss of that was really a big deal. But the benchmark indicators and scoring come out of this notion that evolved actually first in about 1992, the previous time the HRSA program had been funded. At that point in time, it was under Dr. Chris Kaufman, who was a surgeon, who many of you know. He was a Uniform Health Service guy at that point in time and headed up the agency. And they produced a draft model trauma system plan, and it was the first time that anyone had ever connected the dots between trauma and public health. And the reason that we thought it was important to do that was simply because the language of trauma is foreign to anyone who's not in trauma. You can sit up and you can talk about trauma, and everybody's going to come away mostly thinking about, oh, post-traumatic stress disorder, or a trauma, emotional trauma in someone's life. But people aren't going to think about an organized system of care for the severely injured patient. And so we really anticipated that if we could start talking a public health lingo, that perhaps we could get people's attention. And that particular process was carried forward into the next iteration of that document, which we began in about 2003 and finished in 2006. And it was the first time we had ever tried to link trauma systems to the public health infrastructure. And so we took those 3 core functions and 10 essential services of public health, the 3 core functions being assessment, policy development, and assurance, and we were able to draw pretty direct comparisons to what we've been trying to do in EMS and trauma for now 30, 35, 40 years, and try to form it in a lingo that maybe was more accessible to our public health colleagues. Well, when you draw these wheels with these 3 core functions circling the wheels, and you start to plug in all the things that we do in terms of trying to make sure that we've got sufficient EMS resources, we've got quality dispatch, we've got acute care facilities in the right place at the right level of verification or designation, and so forth, the circles kind of fit. Well, to sort of finish off then, the notion that we were buying into the public health infrastructure, the public health model, since it has been around now for a couple hundred years and continues to get funding, not always enough funding, but there's continued support for it within the public domain, we decided to capture one of the assessment tools that they use during that assessment phase, that 3 core function. You can imagine an arrow going a third of the way around the outer diameter or the outer circumference of a circle that says assessment, one that says policy development, and one that says assurance. The assessment section, one of the tools that they have used repeatedly now for more than 50 years or so, is called a benchmark indicator and scoring tool. The benchmarks are very broad concepts. And then underneath those, we actually have indicators that mark some progress or some portion of that benchmark. And then finally, we have a scoring process associated with each of those indicators. And in this particular process, the scores are 1 through 5. And you, as the consumer, as the people that know, as the leaders, the stakeholders, score those processes individually, and then we facilitate a consensus among those scores. When we did the facilitated field test in San Antonio, and I happen to have a copy of that report with me, which is the only thing that I have that works because it's on paper. There were 113 indicators, excuse me. And there were 17 indicators that the San Antonio region ranked as a 5, the highest possible. They really felt that they had achieved that. And there were 16 indicators that they ranked themselves a 1. So there was really a wide disparity depending upon what the particular question was, whether it related to injury epidemiology, or whether it related to acute care facilities, or whether it related to some other aspect of the trauma care system. And the most important part about that is during sort of the evaluation of each of those 113 indicators, there was a wide range of scores for each indicator. So for instance, let's go to benchmark 100. Benchmark 100 says there, and I'm pulling this right out of my memory bank right now, so it's not terribly accurate. But that highest level statement says, Benchmark 100 says something to the effect that there is an integrated injury surveillance system that allows the region or the state to be able to identify the major causes of injury, to further stratify those by age, gender, race, and so forth. And then the next indicator, the first indicator, so here's benchmark 100. There may be 100.1, 100.2, 100.3, 100.4. I don't remember how many indicators there are, but there are several that support that benchmark. And the indicator might be, again, it would break it down to say there are injury surveillance reports, but they can't be stratified by gender, age, race, geography, and so forth.
You know what I think would really be useful for the folks in the room, could you give a brief overview of the general process that you would go through?
I will. Let me get there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for reminding me. I probably would have forgotten. I'm so wrapped up in trying to remember the details here. So 100.1 would support that benchmark, and then there would be a score from 1 to 5, and you all would rate yourself. And again, the interesting part about all of the facilitated benchmarks is that there are people in the room that would score that a 1 and others that would score that a 5, only because we're not all privy to the same sets of information. Even though we're friends and neighbors and go to the same church or whatever it is, we all have little silos of information. And it's actually during the facilitation and to the attainment of consensus that you get the information exchange. It's the most valuable part of the process because then everyone in the room, all of the stakeholders, have a similar idea about what your particular rating on that indicator might be. So let me tell you a little bit then about the process that we envision in Texas. The good folks at the state are soliciting input from you, and they have already taken a run at those 113 indicators and pared them down by about 50%, and we're hoping that those are the key indicators that will really allow us to establish a benchmark for each of the 22 RACs. And so our process, the process that we envision is that Dr. Lydecker will do an assessment focused specifically on your RAC and your needs. We'll do a little higher level, a little broader facilitation using this benchmark indicator and scoring process. And the reason that we're sort of committed to that is we have baseline data from other regions, from other states, and so it gives us a good idea. It's the only validated assessment tool that we know of for trauma system development. So we would do the BIS facilitation. Dr. Lydecker would hone in a little bit on the specific nuances of an assessment for each of the RACs. Then what would happen is through a consensus process, we would actually develop a series of focused questions, the questions that are most pressing for you in your RAC, the issues that you need to address. And we would go from there to a focused consultation in which we would bring a team that would probably comprise a surgeon, an emergency physician, an EMS type, and a trauma program manager, something like that. Again, we're still trying to figure out what the best composition for that team would be. And based on that baseline set of information, and based on the answers to the specific questions that Dr. Lydecker will be working on you with, we would then provide you with a set of summary recommendations about what we think are the next appropriate steps for you in the trauma and EMS system evolution for your region. And then the nice part about it is that those reports give you an opportunity to target existing resources, and we're hoping to target additional resources in the future. And again, the nicest part about it is when we're all done, you're positioned to do something that no state has ever done before, and that is to compare a pre-process improvement project with post-outcome results, because we'll have the baseline data, and we can take those data and we can reassess them later down the road. We are excited about the prospect, and again, there are no guarantees here, but we're excited about the prospect of our advocacy pillar, that meaning the American College of Surgeons advocacy pillar, really holding up and shining some light on this process that the state of Texas is going through as a model to how to move trauma system evaluation and planning forward in other states, in other regions. And if we can pull it off together, you guys will certainly even have a more excellent reputation than you currently do now, and believe me, it's a very excellent reputation as it sits. So we are hoping that that process will allow us to potentially bring some attention to Texas and help you in the individual RACs, and potentially provide for additional resources that you can do your job. So again, without slides, that's probably the best I can do.
Thank you.
You've done a good job without slides. So ladies and gentlemen, let me just recap really quickly, just to make sure we're kind of all on the same page about what's going on here. So, as Dr. Sandel has spoken about, there are going to be the on-site assessments in each of the 22 RACs. Prior to the on-site assessments, though, we want to go in and have some information at our fingertips to help with those discussions that can support that process that the American College of Surgeons will use during that process. In order to do that, we're going to do two things. We're going to have two surveys. One survey that the American College of Surgeons is going to put out with specific questions related to a specific methodology that they have in place, and a second set of questions, a second survey, which we're going to build beginning today with your input and your ideas that are really more targeted to some of the things that we think may be relevant to you. I think both surveys are relevant to what we're trying to achieve here. It's just two separate ways of getting information, and as we've talked about it, there's not a real good way to combine the two, so we've opted kind of for the two different surveys. So to me, the takeaway for this is on-site assessments are going to take place. Prior to the on-site assessments, we want to do some information gathering. The information gathering is going to be done in two ways: an assessment survey from the American College of Surgeons and an assessment survey from DSHS, which you all are going to help build today. I'm going to stop here and see if you all have questions or comments at this point in time before we move into the next portion of this, get your brainstorm feedback.
Do that last part. Do that last part, please. Again, there's going to be two surveys.
It's going to be two surveys. So let me. I'll back up just a little, reverse a little bit before that. The on-site assessments are going to take place at each of the 22 trauma service areas based on the American College of Surgeons methodology. In order to be prepared and to help support those on-site assessments, two surveys will take place. One survey will come from the American College of Surgeons based on specific indicators that they have used previously in their work, and a second survey will come based on the discussions that we're going to have here today and the input that you're going to provide. It's a little cumbersome to have two surveys, But one of the reasons that we've opted for this is we want to make sure that we're being true to the methodology that the ACS has been using in the past and will continue to use in the future in order to be able to make proper comparisons across other systems. But we also recognize, based on feedback from you all, that there are other sets of questions, there's other information that you think is valuable that you would like to see reflected in this process. And so, getting back to your point, Daryl, so there are two surveys, one an ACS survey, a second a DSHS survey. Does that help, sir?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And those are online. Those are not, so when you say the word survey, to some people that means somebody is standing on site. So it's.
Let's call it an online assessment tool.
Survey Monkey?
A Survey Monkey, something like that. I mean, that Survey Monkey is like a Xerox is to a copier, so but it will be an online assessment. I'm not sure of the methodology that Dr. Sandel and the ACS use, but essentially it would be a Survey Monkey. Yes, sir.
So cutting to what they use is, are we talking about the 2006 HRSA, product in association with the ACS product and a cut down of those 120 to 60 or so? Is that where we are?
I believe that is correct. It may be cut down a little further, but I'd have to defer to Jane and to Dr. Sandel.
That is essentially correct. I think that as Jane and you all look at those indicators that have been selected so far, I think it may be possible to trim them down even a bit further from 60 to some magic number. I don't know what that magic number may be, and I don't think this mic is working. So I will try to talk loudly. And our process is that it will be an electronic survey. However, we would anticipate still doing an on-site meeting with you all. This is during the assessment phase. This is during the benchmark indicator and scoring phase, the same thing that Dr. Latiker is talking about. But we would plan on bringing a facilitator in and working with Dr. Latiker to actually achieve some consensus based upon the results of the online survey. So ours would be two-pronged, and I would guess it would be a good opportunity for Dr. Latiker to get clarification, if need be, about his questions as well.
And so, looking at the notes, John, that you passed out.
Yes, ma'am.
So, and it's talking about the surveys, and it says that the surveys will go to the RAC membership. Is that going to be send them to us and we disperse the link? I mean, how is it determined that we're going to get to the RAC membership? How is that piece going to occur?
I would have to defer to Jane and to Colin on this. I think, I'm not sure if we've made a decision on how that would best work, but I think the idea generally was the broader membership of the Regional Advisory Council on Trauma would be able to have input. But I think we would like to get your advice on how you think that best could work. We've had some internal discussions about it, but really no decision on it at this point in time. So, Christine, if you have advice on that, we would certainly welcome that. And others as well.
Right. So with regard to that particular product, there has been some advance view of that and some work, I know, on behalf of some folks in conjunction with the state to perhaps modify the original product to get some demographics of who's responding and things like that, so that, like a Survey Monkey, we could distribute it out and then collate that data into a regional consolidation, so to speak. That's the path that I know in our area we've used for other like products, and would seek to do the same thing.
Okay, thank you for that feedback. I'm sorry, Jane.
Yeah, I was just going to say that what John had said was correct, and Rick, what you said was correct. When we kind of started down this path of thinking we would partner with the ACS to do this, we started talking about doing the BIS tool as an electronic survey. And so then we started looking at how could that be modified somewhat. So from that, we kind of, what grew out of that was, well, we have some things in Texas that we probably want to get to that maybe the BIS would not answer for us. And so we want to know in Texas, what kind of questions do we need to formulate for our state that may not come out of the BIS. So it's I don't think the BIS tool, as far as what would be put out as a survey, is actually finalized yet.
So I understand. I mean, in theory, I guess I completely agree with trying to make sure we get questions. We get as much out of the process as we can.
Mm-hmm.
But how many people have taken? I mean, have been a part of the BIS? How are we going to know what to ask if they don't know it? We're the only ones that have done it, right? So everybody in San Antonio needs to not answer. I mean, we may be able to answer, but I frankly, I should say, I don't know that I can remember. It was pretty long.
Yeah,
So
well,
how will we know what questions to tell you that are going to be duplicative to the BIS? And I don't understand.
well, I don't think you don't have to sort through that, Eric. I think we work on what do we want to know from the Texas perspective. And then we can sort through what is duplicative in the BIS.
Okay.
I think that's the simplest
So
way to
today we're going to
go.
build a survey. That's the goal here, is to get people's ideas about what we want to know about in Texas and trauma.
Right.
That is correct, sir.
So,
The BIS, it's the benchmarks, indicators, and scoring. Okay, and that's in that HRSA model trauma system plan. Okay.
yeah, so Jane, so when, several years ago, following the ACS's survey results, all of the RACs got together on many several occasions to go through. I have mine with me, so that's what I was looking at, listening to him.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went through it and we made suggestions, comments, questions, and then it sat to the side. And I know that there's been lots of staffing changes at DSHS. So while I think we could just say, these are what we want to know in Texas, if all of those questions that we think we want to know are already part of the ACS survey, so I'm not going to say this as tactfully as I probably could.
That's okay.
It'll almost be like a waste, because we're sitting in here, we're going to go through stuff, and all those questions are already on the tool.
Well,
I mean, you
Christine,
see-
I don't see
you
that
know
it's
what I'm saying?
I don't see that it's a waste to find out what people really want to know out of a regional assessment. Whether it may be already included on the BIS tool, and that just validates that that's the indicator that we need to work with. So I don't see that as a waste to validate what we want to know.
So I think administratively, just from a process standpoint, what I'm getting is the, chicken or the egg. I mean, do we start with the BIS and see what's there as a stepping off point, to discuss and how that relates to Texas? Or what I'm hearing you say is start with a clean sheet and then see if what we come up with on the clean sheet is already in the BIS, right? I think there's a question of efficiency of what we're trying to do with this process right now.
That was probably better worded.
Well, I think you can do it either way.
That's
I mean,
what I meant there.
Basically, the BIS is a large tool. There's a lot of information in it. It's a tool that is really used for discussion, and you can chime in here and correct me if I'm wrong, Nils.
I don't have slides.
So it's really because when we sat around and went through the BIS and did self-scoring, when we were preparing for the ACS to come in 2010, we sat around in a group of like 15 or 20 people within the DSHS to discuss those different indicators and how you would score the state. So for me, it was a discussion tool. And versus if we have a different perspective on what we want to glean from this assessment and consult, we may want to structure it differently. It may be different. There may be something different in Texas that may or may not come out with the BIS. So I think we don't have to redo the BIS, and we don't have to know everything that's in the BIS. I don't believe, in order to go down the road of determining what's important to these RACs, to our stakeholders, to know from an external review and consultation.
I think from our perspective, from the ACS perspective, again, remember we have a two-step process. We've got the BIS and a combined assessment, however that works out. And from that, there will be an on-site consultation with a consultative team during which you're going to tell your story. We're going to be able to figure out where you are in the process and make recommendations to you about what the next steps might be. And anything that we can do to help you all in each of the individual RACs focus in on specific questions, specific areas that you would like us to focus on while we're on site doing that consultative visit is going to create much greater value for us, for you, and make our job much easier. So I think what we're trying to get to is, yes, the BIS is a great format. It's going to give us strong baseline information that we can go back and remeasure against. It's been validated in other places. We know that it has some value. We know it's an imperfect tool at best. But what we really want to see, what the ACS wants to see coming out of today and tomorrow's discussion, is what additional information that may or may not be contained in the BIS do you want to focus on in your region to try to get some expert opinion about what you might do next to try to solve that problem. And quite frankly, sometimes it's just having somebody from the outside saying the same thing that you've been saying to the legislature or the county commissioners or the regulators or to whomever for the past 10 years, but it makes a difference to have it come from the outside. So whatever we can do to sort of focus in on those questions, those areas that are of greatest concern to you, that's going to be inordinately helpful to both of us.
Yep, I agree. Let's get started.
So can I comment on that? So I think perhaps not necessarily knowing all 60 or 120 or however many questions is required. I think some sort of framework, though, would be helpful to at least know some of the basic domains. Because if it's similar to what the ACS survey for the state was before, at least there's some prior experience in the room answering those questions. Not all RACs in the state have ACS verified facilities within their borders. So I think there would be some lack of familiarity with what the ACS, are these going to be similar to like our PRQ questions that we do for verification? Are we looking more in the public health domain? At least having some basic framework would help. And I say this because of experience trying to gather information on the registry. That was like herding cats when we did kind of some state survey of things that we want to know or additional things that we want from Tammy's group. And without having some clear, concise goals to go forward and asking those questions, we really didn't get what we wanted when we did those questions, when we said that information.
So maybe just kind of I'm sorry, Derek, go ahead, Daryl, I apologize.
So my hope is that through this process, we will be in better position in the Houston region to serve patients 4 years out from now in a better fashion than we would if we naively go into those 4 years without knowing what we're going to learn from this survey. We're going to be better off 4 years from now as a result of this survey. And number two, that we can go to the legislature with some real data from a third party that has notoriety and explain to the public that the money that they would give us would be wisely spent for these particular reasons. Can you assure me that those two goals will be met?
There are no absolutes, but I can assure you that we have the same goals, and I assure you that the ACS would be a tireless partner to help you achieve those goals.
So Jane, in one of the documents we developed out of those meetings that we did previously, it did reference that we potentially would use the PRQ for the RACs to kind of use as a guiding tool to come up with some assessment questions before we were even down this process with the ACS. So when Kelly brought it up, you know, is that maybe a good place we start? And I mean, we have to have a starting spot. I mean, you see, so it's kind of like we just need a place to jump off, and then the discussion will ensue, I think.
I agree too, Jim.
I mean, I can read what we said our vulnerabilities were from that document that we did. I mean, I feel like we just need a place to jump, and then once we start jumping, then everybody will start.
I think the questions, the 60 questions or whatever, knowing what those are would be a perfect place for us to launch from.
All right, well, hold on.
One of the things that I was going to show in my slides is that there are other tools that the ACS has or is working on that could be a help in each of the regions. For instance, it's again an assessment tool, but recognizing that all politics and all resources are local, it allows you to make you make all the decisions, in fact. So the first one that I can remember off the top of my head is X percent of severely injured trauma patients will arrive it's more specific than that. X percent of step 1 or step 2 trauma patients from the CDC field triage criteria will arrive at a level 1 or a level 2 within Y number of minutes. I don't know what the right number in your RAC for X is, what percent, and I don't know what the right number for Y is in what time frame. But those are the kind of philosophical, political, financial constructs and questions that need to be wrestled with at the local level, because that's where all those decisions have to occur. Texas can't force them on you. Certainly the American College of Surgeons can't and doesn't even want to, but those are the kinds of discussions that may help us generate the specific focus questions that your RAC needs to have answered. And so I think we can think about it in that kind of a framework as well.
And one of the things we've done, and maybe while Jane is looking for this, and I'll just call folks' attention to page 2 and 3 of the green sheet, and I think getting to your point, Christine, that we don't want to start with a blank slate, that we've used the BIS, the indicators that have been a part of the ACS assessment process to come up with several domains that we think are relevant. And I think part of what today's discussion is to look at these domains and say, number one, from y'all's perspective, do y'all think that these are relevant? And if you do think they're relevant, help us understand what are specific areas within those domains that would be useful. And so the domains range, and I think Rick, this gets back to your comment earlier about demographic information. We want to make sure that we're collecting the appropriate demographic information on both sets of surveys that allows the appropriate analysis to be done. So when reports are made that are provided back to you all and comparisons are done to other RACs, that, you know, if you're a rural RAC, that you're not just being compared to the mean, for example, or if you're an urban RAC, you're not just being compared to the mean, because as Dr. Sandel has noted, and you all well know, all the RACs are different, and the different needs, different budgets, different personnels, different populations that are served. So one of those domains is that demographic piece, and then there's several others related, you know, from injury data and assessment on through. And so I think what our hope today was to go through these and to really hear your all's feedback and comments. But I'd ask if you think that's in line with what you all were thinking.
Yeah, so I would say that if we're looking for something as specific as what percent of, that kind of lets us know. So definitely some sort of mechanism to see where our performance improvement measures are across the state of Texas. That's something we've been talking about for years, is how do we align them? We all collect different performance improvement data. I know, yeah, so systems, so the information that Wanda's able to collect from her EMS agencies is vastly different in the amount of data that my EMS agencies will provide.
And I think that's kind of what we're hoping to get at. I will say the intent today was not to develop specific questions. I think the intent today was to say, these are domains that we think are relevant. Help us understand what within that domain, what things would you like to know within that domain that would be helpful to you? How would you use it? How would it be helpful? And the more that we could get that feedback, then as part of a next step in this iterative process, is us working and developing questions that would go back to you all for review. So we see this as just kind of a first step process to help inform that. And if you all are okay with that, I would like to, maybe suggest that we move forward, because we really do want to maximize our time on this while we have you all here and tomorrow. But I'll ask Colin and Jane and Dr. Sandel. I mean, that's what we had planned for today. But
Sounds great.
What's the timeline for initiation of these surveys?
so the question is, what is the timeline for the initiation of the surveys? I'll defer to Jane.
Yeah, give Wanda the microphone.
I am, move her closer to her.
That's not been finalized, Wanda, so we don't know what that is yet.
So I think the answer is enough time to make sure we have the process down correctly. I think rushing into it would waste a really valuable opportunity that we all have to really be able to document the progress that Texas has made and continues to make in the evolution of EMS and trauma systems.
So with your all's permission, I'm going to suggest that we move along on to the domains, unless anybody has any other comments they would like to make before doing so. So I've put on the slides, the first question I guess I would have is these, on the green sheets, what's on the slide. We've identified 6 domains and then a domain called Other, which when we get to that, I think Colin has some specific things he'd like to suggest that we may want to consider. But the first question I would have for folks here in the room, are these domains relevant to what we ought to be considering? So yes, they are. No, they're not. They should be tweaked. We should add. We should take away. They range from demographic information, domain A, injury data and assessment, domain B, trauma system planning, domain C, partnerships, domain D as in David, E, workforce-related issues with training and competence, and F, evaluation and quality improvement. Again, this was taken and based on the indicators that Dr. Sandel and the ACS have used. This is how we created those major areas. What are your all's thoughts on that? Yay, nay, go jump in a lake?
Well, I guess, John, if we're going, in some respect, they need to be similar to that previous DCS survey. I guess if we're going to compare these two, if things we looked at in the, I think it's wrong, the 2010 survey that was pushed to legislation to say we need to change this, and if we're saying the same thing and asking the same thing, and it really hadn't made an effect, what do we do with that data? Do we say, well, it hadn't been done yet, so we try to reinforce that with this? So I guess it kind of has to go in line with that previous survey, or maybe I'm off base.
I would say you're on track, and I think what we've tried to do, but again, I would, and Dr. Sandel may have some comments on this as well too. I think from a methodology standpoint with these domains, we've tried to be true to the domains that, based on feedback from DSHS, because there's the 110 or so indicators that were used at the state level. Not all of those necessarily are applicable to a regional trauma system. So CAT-RAC, for example, they're state level indicators that may not be relevant to you all. So those that DSHS felt were relevant to one of the local 22 regions, we looked at those and said, we think that these 10, 15, 20 BIS, they fall into one of these domains. So I think we've tried to do that, but in order to be true to that process, because you don't want to, I don't think we want to deviate from that process, Dave.
I guess the only other thing I can see is another bucket.
Okay.
That didn't leave out stuff that doesn't fit here that we certainly think should be addressed.
I think you're right, and I know when we talk, and what I'd like to do is, go through each one of these and dissect them in a little more detail. But I think when we get to the other, I think one of the things that Colin wants to talk about is to suggest some ideas. Are there other topics related to how the RACs work, succession planning, things of this nature that are important to you all that could help you all be stronger RACs after having, received the data and feedback about where you stand? But the other is a good category for that.
So,
Whoops.
I'm sorry.
Darryl, let me give you.
So, I have a big desire from our market. It's got to fall in here, or we need another bucket.
Okay.
The population in the Houston area is growing so fast, and the trauma system is not necessarily keeping up with the population growth. And I would like some input on whether or not what we should do about that problem. So I hope it's assessed in these buckets, or we add a bucket, because that's really what I'm interested in.
My guess is that those questions are in the biz, not in this.
I have a question too.
Yes, sir.
Or, I'm not sure if it's a question or a comment, but I remember when this was first being kicked off, and early discussions were that, if I recall properly, this would not end up being a report card on the regions, which I'd like to, hear a comment about that. But, the second piece to that may or may not be related, it may not be possible to not be a report card in light of my next comment, and that is, I'm an old military guy, so I'm recognizing planning comments in here, but I'm not necessarily seeing resource and capabilities measurements. And so I hearken back to an old college professor who used to go crazy at the front of the room about trouble with we're all hung up in process and not in outcomes. So I'm a little curious about, is there a place, or should there be a place for capability measurement in this? As I think back to ACS surveys, there's a big chunk of that has to do with disaster response. And so of course, as we look at populations, we look at growth, are we adequately mapping to the needs of that region? And I'm not necessarily seeing it in the questions as they're laid out.
I think related to the second part of that question in terms of looking at capabilities and so forth. I think if you all think those need to be reflected, I think we need to hear that today, because again, this is a straw man if there ever was a straw man. So it's to start this conversation. So I take your point very well that it's not reflected in it all, either at all or the way you would like to see it. And if it's not, we need to make sure that we're hearing these comments so we can figure out how to get it in there. I think getting back to your first part of the comment about is it a report card, I think it's designed not to be, but I defer to Jane or to Colin on this. But I think in our discussions, it's not intended to be that.
So I don't know how to not do it and still have capability measures.
Cool.
I can tell you from the ACS perspective, it is absolutely not a report card. It is an individualized assessment. Are there ways to maybe slice and dice the data into some various buckets, rural versus urban and so forth? The answer is yes. Can we do that in an unidentifiable process? The answer is also yes. And then indeed, your question about resources and capabilities, I think as we end up not only getting your feedback tonight, but as we compare that feedback to what's already contained in the BIS, I think some of those answers will be gathered from there. So it will help us make the appropriate selection of which BIS questions to ask you.
Does that help answer your question? And you all, I think you all know me well enough. I really truly do want to answer your question. So I think if we're not, I would hope you would say you haven't answered it. Try again.
Sure. I mean, it's a little bit free form right now. I'm just thinking out loud,
Sure.
and so look forward to rebuttals to those thoughts.
Rick, I'll tell you what I told TTCF yesterday. We talked about this was coming. This is not a pass-fail. You know, when we did the assessment of the state and the consultation, you know, we kind of looked at it, well, you know, there's a lot of things that we don't do, but there's some of the things that don't fit in our Texas scheme. And so those we kind of put to the side. Other things that we do, that maybe we can do them better. So from my perspective, this is not a pass-fail for any region. It is really opportunity to identify where there are gaps and where we might be able to have some synergies, have some opportunities to improve. I mean, that's what the whole thing is about. To me, it is not a report card, unless you want to use it that way within your RAC. It's an assessment, a self-assessment.
I guess a couple things come to mind. One, in light of yesterday's discussion about the ASEP findings, that certainly was styled as a report card, and so that's something to bounce off against for however we use that. And there's a lot of ways to use it. And then I think, to my earliest days of being involved with this group, and that was, essential criteria and RAC designation and any number of things that are existing expectations, and will they find their way, or should they find their way, into this opportunity?
I don't know why we're scared of the report card. If it's a report card, I think that's fine. If there's failing grades or successful grades, I think that's fine. If it tells me that I'm not doing, I mean, Nell's referred to, we had like 16 terribles. I mean, if you don't know what's wrong, if you don't know you have infection in the ICU, you're not going to fix we have to know what the problems are if we're going to try to focus on what the solutions are. And if someone else has really good scores, I need to go pick their brain and figure out how they're doing whatever they're doing well. We don't need to be frightened in this environment, I don't think. Although it's going to sting, no one ever likes hearing that they do something badly. I don't disagree with that, but we're not going to get better if we don't ask. And I don't think we should necessarily try to, I would prefer not to do something we're simply going to dumb down that's not going to show us anything because we're scared of saying anybody does anything bad. So that's my 2 cents.
Every kid doesn't need a trophy.
Every kid doesn't need a trophy. I agree. So there ought to be. What do we do? So we've been doing this about an hour. So how much time do we have today? 2 hours more? 7?
We're scheduled to go to 7:30. I think.
Okay.
We can go longer if you like. I'm sensing from your
That's
tone that you're not wanting to do
Who
that.
thinks we ought to move along and start doing something?
Okay.
Yeah, it's a bunch of trauma nurses in this room going, what are we doing?
Well,
Let's get into it.
Let's move
For
along.
long, at least. It's like a tank commander says, left or right. Left is the best way, right is better, but staying still is a bad decision.
I take my cue from the PCC vice chair. We'll move ahead here.
Disaster domain?
I think if you would like, are you suggesting?
Yeah, so I was gonna move us on with that suggestion,
Okay.
but the only thing, I mean, looking through all those, that's all stuff that we all talk about all the time. The only piece that's missing out of that is the emergency management disaster piece, and it is part of the, HRSA trauma model.
Yeah, it's true.
Okay.
So I don't know if that's another domain bucket. I would like it to see, because I think we would do much better in this report card than we did on the,
And those questions pertaining to preparedness and disaster, they fall into several different categories within the BEST. So,
But I think if you all feel strongly about that, we can go back and look about it and figure out where that could fit in. So
that's kind of the point. I mean, I agree we should just move on, but that's the point. If we think there should be emergency management questions and they're there, then we don't need to waste time talking about what we think those should be.
I agree with that.
But whatever, let's just do something. Even
So-
if it's wrong, let's just do something.
So I think the feedback of knowing the preparedness piece ought to be there, I think we'll react to that, so thank you for that. Let me move then to.
So can we so do you want to take the biz instead, Wanda? Would you rather just use the biz questions first and go through that and see what's missing? Or would that be a better strategy, maybe?
I think it's easier to have a place to start than to try try to draw free form, but
Okay, so do we have the biz handy?
I don't think we're,
can't get it off my computer.
I don't think we're prepared to do that today.
How's another way to do it? If we can't get off of Jane's computer, does anybody else have a computer? I have a computer.
Okay. so-
Thank you. Google it.
So let me,
Go, Tammy.
I can pull it off the.
so
but we don't know which of the questions are,
I-
have been deleted.
Can we just answer his questions on your, John, can we just answer?
my preference would be to do that, not just because it's the process we came in here with, but I think if we were to try to go through each of the BIS questions, I think we would be here to midnight. I think if we can understand from you what you think is important related to these domains and/or new domains, I think our next step then is to go back, re-look at the BIS, and try to figure out what exact questions could be. That would be my suggestion.
Press forward.
Okay, so let's talk about demographics. What I'd like to understand from you all is, from a demographic perspective, and when I say demographics, I'm thinking, who's taking the survey, which counties, which county does that person normally work in within the RAC, do they work in a hospital or an EMS? What is important for you all to see reflected in the survey, thinking about how the results of this could be used? Because we can analyze this in a variety of ways. What's important for you all? Is it important to know the type of entity they work in, a hospital versus an EMS, in terms of how
Yes.
the data? So tell us, the type of entity that they work in. So we're thinking EMS, we're thinking hospital. What other types of entities are important to you guys?
Colin, we already provided a lot of this in draft documents. I mean, I know some folks have already spread this out, so.
So some of this is already available?
Well, it's been contributed by at least a couple of folks who thought they were going to get surveyed in April.
Okay.
And so I can't spit that all back out, but yes.
Okay,
yes.
so we should refer to those.
Well, it doesn't help these other folks who weren't part of that, so
Sure.
I'm asking if that's available to bring up. It would be another starting point to, no.
I don't know the answer to that question.
I'm looking, I know Leanne's not here.
So I'm sure it's stuff like the TSA, the county, what type of agency they work for, what are they?
Like
Are they a medic, a
Are you an
nurse?
administrator, are you a
Okay.
clinician?
Right,
are you a-
what their position is.
Okay.
I don't know if it matters to me how long they've been, I guess maybe it matters to me how long they've been working for the RAC, working with the RAC. Okay.
But, yeah.
Okay.
So
Yes, all these
location.
different things matter. If you're trying to get down into the weeds of what they are, there's people who have worked on that in our case.
Okay.
I can't speak for
Right.
Eric, I can't speak for these gals here, but
Leanne worked on that with you?
Leanne worked on it
And
with
Catherine?
Catherine.
Okay, wherever they.
Catherine, do you have your info with you?
I trust those.
Catherine Bissell.
I don't have.
Okay, that's okay.
But what we can do is we can follow up and find those sources either directly with you all through DSHS or with DSHS. So again, not trying to duplicate information, but this is helpful to know what's been done.
So I
I
don't want
trust those two.
beating the hell out of this
to
dead
come up with
horse, but
demographic information. If they think we needed it, then Leanne and Catherine, I'm okay with saying.
the BIS that's been worked on has that in it,
Okay.
I'm trying to make some.
Yeah, I'm just,
Where is my horse? I need my horse.
yes.
For the owl.
Okay.
Demographics need to be expanded.
Okay. Are there other comments besides what we have related to demographics and looking back at some of these other things that you all think would be helpful?
There was some feedback, and I guess this goes back, of course, resourcing, hold on a second. Let's see, like system finance, we talked about disaster preparedness already.
Okay.
Um,
So system finance, disaster preparedness.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about disaster preparedness, resources, and capabilities, but I recall when we went through it in our RAC and trying to do the regional trauma plan, finance, system finance, and some of the things that appeared to be higher level considerations, were discussion points for us, but it's
Okay.
in the original product, the original ACS and HRSA product.
Okay. Hearing no other comments, I'm going to move to the next. The other area that, based on the indicators for the regional levels that were pulled out of the total were things related to injury data and assessment, and this had to do with collection analysis and the use of injury data. Can you all give us an idea of what is important to you related to this domain? And some of the things that we thought about were morbidity and mortality data sources, how data is accessed, shared, and analyzed, how it's used to support your risk assessment activities, how you link it with public health data. Any thoughts on this? Is this important to you all?
Why are we, there's a lot of people who know this stuff better than we do. I mean,
Well, I think one of the things there too, and I mean, a lot of us out here know that. I think where we're kind of getting bogged down, if we've got a select number that have already taken the survey, and you know how when you throw stuff on the screen, you say, oh, well, why didn't we do that? Or, oh, why didn't we do this? Or, so I think that's what we're kind of pulling out of the air here. Let me see what needs to be on there, and if it's already on there in some of the past surveys, are we just kind of sitting here thinking, well, shoot, we're going to go through the motions here of putting stuff that's already on there. I guess that's
So,
where I'm getting confused.
Is it
here.
something that, so I'm speaking for me only, I plan to attend both sessions because I know when you do a session, the different people are in the room, different discussions occur. So I was planning to attend both. I'm not sure about everybody else. If everybody was planning to attend both for the same reason, is there a way we could get some of those other documents together?
You're talking about both sessions of this, you mean?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
okay.
Both sessions of this, because we keep going back to, we don't know what the information is, we don't know. Maybe we can fix the doctor's, you know, the issue with his data versus his presentation versus our IT stuff, or that gives Colin a chance, or you tell us where to go look, and tonight we'll look, you know. Right, yeah, I mean, I don't want to spend, if everybody was coming tomorrow, then maybe it's best that we either fix the problem with the PowerPoint presentation, or you tell us what those documents are and you email them to us, tell us where to go, we'll review them on our own time tonight. I mean.
So what I'm hearing is y'all aren't finding this helpful. So, to say the least, I think the purpose of this is to be helpful, so if it's not helpful, that's an issue, because it really is meant to be. I think the idea was to get feedback from you all on the different domains and questions that could be asked. I'm hearing from you all that there's other sources of information out there on this. If that's the case, maybe what we need to do is we need to look at those and maybe come back with something more developed to present to you all rather than this brainstorming piece. I'm struggling to try to be useful in the process of making sure we're representing your feedback.
So,
this,
John, I'm looking at this. Sorry, I'm trying.
It's okay, Wanda.
I'm looking at this, and even under the injury data and assessment, the first one says, think about injury, morbidity, and mortality data sources available in your TSA. So are you asking us to help you craft a question that would be on the survey that members of our RACs could answer?
In essence, that's what we're trying to get to. I don't think we were asking to help craft a question tonight. I think we were looking for your ideas and suggestions of what's important to you related to those areas, that we would then come back and craft some questions and that we would continue the process. That's what I think. But in essence, yes.
Because, please understand, I have the greatest respect for the individuals in my area. But if I have a rural ECA who's a member of my RAC answer this question, he can tell you, I give data to the RAC. He probably cannot tell you the injury, morbidity, and mortality data sources. He probably can't explain to you. He gives us data, it happens, and it's on the screen.
Okay.
So I think we have to figure out who's going to answer these and what we're trying to get from them.
I think that's helpful feedback, Wanda. Thank you.
Wanda, let me add something to that, is that from EMS, we give you the data, but and we were just discussing, what would be important to me to know that if I go to level 3, is it making a difference in that patient versus a level 2? are level 4. The problem is that feedback doesn't get back to us and whether or not we're doing any good to get the patient to the right facility. We don't get anything back from that saying that this patient improved or the mortality. We give you it, but we don't get it back. Does that make sense? And I'm not sure that we as a region really look at that in that perspective.
Okay.
Makes sense?
Yes.
And that's helpful feedback as well too, because I think, to me, I think that's one of the things that we were trying to get at having this conversation is understanding, maybe not necessarily asking the end user what data sources they have, but trying to figure out how people use or don't use data, or what data is available and is not available, so we could ask appropriate questions for the end user that could be helpful. So, and I don't know how to say it more than that, but I think it's a little bit of everything that we're hearing here. The question I guess I would have for folks, and I would include Colin and Jane on this, what is your pleasure in the sense of I'm sensing that you're not finding this helpful. I'm sensing that you're saying that some of this information or a lot of this has already been provided. What would you suggest as a next step for this? I mean, do you want to continue through and having a brainstorming discussion about these things, or do you think that's not useful at this point in time? Oh, I'm sorry, Jane.
Well, now, I didn't make RAC chairs in November. I missed out. But it was my understanding that the feedback from the discussion at RAC chairs was that the RACs wanted input into the consultation process and to the development of the questions. So I kind of thought that was what we were doing, that the RACs wanted to be involved on kind of on the front end. So that was part of what we were doing here. So am I mistaken there?
I'm not sure.
I think the significant hang-up is we're dealing with the void of the other survey product
Okay.
and trying to deal with these topics in a blank piece of paper mode that I frankly think, I come back to, I think would be more efficient if we dealt with the survey instrument, the BIS, as treated by, Q and E when we thought we were first up and,
Right.
Give us some feedback.
Right.
Because we have done that. I don't have the opportunity for that to be shared with the group, which was part of our feedback to the department, saying, hey, there are other RACs. This is going to be for all RACs. We need to include them in the development of this process. And I don't mind using our contribution early on as a starting point, but didn't think in my feedback to the department that was the end point. And so now we're trying to deal with 6 categories and what else you want to do when we know that either through individual RACs having used the HRSA model in the past and know the kind of things that's in there, or they don't. And so bringing the product forward, I think, is a more efficient start than what we're clearly doing right now.
Okay. Well, let me see if I can get this one off, and we can put it on the screen, and we can go through it.
I struggle with, when you said go through the questions and develop the questions, I left that meeting not thinking I wanted to get to add specific questions.
Okay.
It was sufficiently vague enough about what if you think today's vague, it was sufficiently vague enough 3 months ago about what the mission, the parameters. We didn't know who was going to be surveyed. We didn't know if the School of Public Health was going to be doing some of them or if ACS was going to every one of them. And so this was supposed to be a lot more about what we're going to get done and how are we going to do it, not what exact questions are we going to ask and which questions do you want, Eric. That's the part where I think I'm vapor locking on going, I wasn't even prepared to add questions. I thought we were gonna talk about methodology, we were talking about strategy of who was gonna go to which place, what order, do you want all the EMS providers, do you want a sample, should we get, I mean, it's all those kind of, I would call it the guts of how to make the right things happen, right? So when we did ours, we had to bring in a sample. I mean, we didn't bring our entire rack. We did it at like the Hyatt, if I remember correctly. Nels, we were like downtown, and there was probably 40 of us.
22.
Okay, so there were 22 people, but there was an EMS medical director or two. There was a couple of trauma surgeons, a couple of level 1 nurses, a couple of level 3 nurses, a couple of level 4 urban and rural nurses, a couple of EMS directors, a couple of air medical guys. There was a sampling of people, and we all sat and took the thing. And then we went through the thing, and then the next day we went through it again. And so, but that's what I think. I don't think anybody even understood how that was. Anybody at RAC chairs last month even knew that much.
Absolutely. Listening to Eric, it never crossed my mind that we were talking about get your stakeholders in a room and we'll do this together. I'm thinking we're sending out survey monkeys to all of the membership. So going exactly to Eric's point.
Yeah, see, so I thought it was.
That's what I thought the day was
I thought it was
about.
both.
Was
Like,
about
I thought-
what we were going to do, not what
Right.
questions specifically do we need to add to the thing to make it meaningful.
Yeah, I thought the
That's
survey was
nice.
going out, and then when ACS was coming in, that they were gonna go with the School of Public Health to the 2 areas and do, for lack of a better term, please, Rick, don't get mad at me, is like a audit. Not like they come in and go, show me your minutes to your board meeting,
No.
show me how
No.
you communicate. Right, that's my point, that's what we left.
This is a
thinking
little
two
bit,
different things.
there's a little bit like a PRQ and then the
Right.
survey and then survey dinner,
Gotcha.
except it was much nicer. I would just tell you, it was much nicer. So I've sat through quite a few dinners that no one ate.
Well, and I guess too, for us that are more involved with that, I would look to y'all, not to put you on the spot, but y'all went through the survey and, well, later on maybe you thought, you know what, that wasn't a very good question. Or, you know what, I wish they would have asked me this. So I guess it goes to that blank sheet of paper again, in the sense that if y'all went through it and thought, this is a pretty good representation of a survey. Going forward from this, maybe, we could add to this, we could add to that. So it's kind of like y'all took the survey, or other RACs took the survey, kind of in that sample, and said, okay, we took it. I guess I'm misinterpreting who took what.
We didn't take the survey. I mean, we were asked to begin, to comment about the cut down that the department was working on with ACS. And so much of that work had to do with, there's no real demographics on here, so let's start adding that. And so that Leanne and Catherine were working on that kind of input to the survey instrument. We didn't take the survey, for content.
I think, where's Colin? Colin, in the state, you should take the lead and put together a survey with questions that you feel are wise. Send it out to us for 1 week of review and comment, and then let's dive in. Let's do it. We weren't planning today to help create questions.
Consensus here, then?
Okay, so we need to hear, where's Mr. Eric? Eric, do you agree that there should be a survey put together with the wisdom of Colin and the state and send it out to the RACs for us to have a week to comment on it and say, why are you asking that question? Or this is screwy, or this is missing. And then at the end of that point in time, we've got a survey to use.
We'll just send the biz.
Or the biz.
I've got a pared down version of
Right.
the biz that are probably 50 to 60 questions.
And that's what I know, and I haven't heard you say that.
I would be interested to hearing what your perceptions on the utility of that tool in the methodology that we're going to use is.
What?
So.
I'm missing something clearly. Why don't we just send the bids? I don't, is there a, do we not like the bids?
They've already pared down to some questions they didn't
It's
want.
real big, and they have a better.
Well, I mean, we can send all 120 questions or so.
I took them. I kind of feel like
There are some that clearly don't apply to TSAs. They're state level, regulatory. Do you want those too?
No, I took the trauma, so I don't know which biz you're talking, I took the regional systems biz. We did the regional trauma systems biz, not the state survey biz.
We did the entire 113 in that particular field test. I think the fact that you have carved out those that you don't think are appropriate at the regional level is a great place to start.
And I can share the document with those still included and just struck so you can see what they are.
I would just do the strike through. I would do the track changes,
fine with
because
that.
frankly, I'd like to know what you struck.
Sure.
I mean, it's a trust but verify kind of
Sure.
thing. Let's
Yeah.
just send out the document, we'll walk all through it and see what you struck out and go, yep, that was a good strikeout, Colin. I don't know anything about state law. So we'll keep moving through it, and then we'll add some questions, I guess, or whatever. But it seems like we have a proven process that other places have used. The ACS is here, they want to work with us, and I feel like we're, I don't know.
Okay, so is that the consensus then that?
Yeah, the bigger question, I think, are the logistics associated with what I said before. I went out to get a cup of coffee. So how are we going to actually what's the plan? What's the plan to deploy this survey in 22 regions? How does it work? What's the plan? We have the ACS here today, we got you here today, we got Jane here today. How do we see this working, and how could we help make that happen for you?
Yeah, well, that's fair. See what we're bouncing off of.
I can certainly develop a slide for tomorrow that would have that process outlined with Dr. Lydeker's help and Colin and Jane.
I have it.
You have it?
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna have to put it over there, I guess.
Okay. I think they want the pared down version of it, but I think
Well,
that's what I just heard.
no, there wasn't no process.
Okay.
Colin.
So, when I look at this piece of paper, and this is the suggestions of brainstorming questions, et cetera, just looking at this would lead me to believe that as you reviewed the biz and you pared down the questions, that you did not think that all of these things that say think about were adequately covered in the biz. And so therefore, we needed to expand on those. Is that?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. And I felt like personally, they didn't get to the real heart of the issues, and that the end result wouldn't be of utility to an ED or RAC board.
So that probably then is a good place to start then. If we can have the biz as it's pared down, and we can go through each of these domains, which I'm assuming are there, and we can look at the questions,
Well,
and then,
I mean, why don't you plug these in as comments on that document, so that we have one document, and if these are things you think are missing, then we can react to them inside of that document and have that discussion. But right now, I'm just kind of in.
homework,
between.
Colin, homework.
I've got it done.
That would be, I think that would be a much more productive discussion if we're reviewing that, and then you've inserted questions that, we're not sure that this is based on comments we have made to, folks over time or complained about in meetings or whatever, that we're not sure this is going to answer that concern that you guys brought up in August of 2000, whatever.
And for what it's worth, I have no concerns about sharing any comments that were made by our staff to you with a larger group. I have no concerns about that whatsoever.
Well, that sounds like the obvious way to move forward, and so.
That's what I thought we were going to do tonight.
So let's go down that road then. If that's what seems to make sense to all of you and us.
Well, we aren't it. This is just a portion, so.
Right.
There's some out
We-
there.
Like Shay, where'd you go?
Danny was back
What do you
there.
think?
Not set up well.
Just to call you out, Shay.
Wake up to.
Hillary.
Well, and frankly, I'm not, I sent it out to my trauma representatives, not
Or,
staff.
Josh, trauma, trauma nurse coordinators,
Right.
program directors, surgeons, the people who actually are the trauma system.
Right.
This is a very,
Rachel.
This is the administration of the RAC.
Scott.
It's the trauma system.
Scott's coming to
Two
talk.
checks.
He's coming to talk.
giddy up, Scott.
My thought process is why if we're going to do an assessment, why do we want to do a scaled down version? Let's just do the assessment. There's not that many components. I think I counted 26 back there a while ago. It's an easy scoring system. You either make a 1 or a 5, or somewhere in between. And, you know, at the end of the day, my RAC on the ones that I scored the lowest on, or what I decide I want to set a priority on, those are the 5 areas that I say, for the next 12 months, I'm going to get these up to the best of my potential. You know, and once I get those done, I go back to where I scored a year ago, pick up 3 or 4 more, work on them. It's a focused effort. So, I mean, I don't necessarily want to waste, not waste, but if I'm going to do an assessment, just do the assessment and be done with it. It's a trauma system. I think we have to incorporate all the elements of the system.
There's no disagreement. I think the input that we were giving, you know, in the last month or so had to do with how do we turn this assessment into something that we can collect from the individual facilities and representatives of the system, as opposed to from the top down. How do we do data collection from the bottom up? And so that was some of our commentary, and I hope to share that.
So, Rick, that's what so I sound like a broken record. That's exactly what I think we were trying to discuss today. I thought the only thing we were going to be discussing is what you just mentioned. Are we trying to look for a sample of 10% or of the leadership or the CEO or an invited group that I might invite, or are we who are we trying to sample? How big is that? Is that electronic? I can send that to every firefighter, paramedic in the region. Is that what we're looking for? Because that's a different, we haven't, I feel like we haven't had that part of the conversation yet, because what I did is very different than inviting the bottom, the sort of regular ER nurse, ICU nurse, paramedic. If I'm asking those people, that's a way. If I ask the CEO or the EMS director, that's a way. I'm not saying one is better or worse. I just don't know what we're trying to do here. And all these questions need to be geared for the target audience of who we're trying to ask, because we're going to get very different questions from the average firefighter, paramedic on a truck if we ask these questions, I can promise you.
Absolutely.
I don't know what we're doing. That's what I'm trying to say. What is the goal of what we're trying to do? And how are we going to do it? And so when we get that done, then we can start setting.
I can speak to just the BIS part of this process, and our thought at this point, and we have put the structure in place to do it, is that the BIS would get sent out to the regional office, to the regional coordinator. You can distribute it, and we've got a strong electronic platform, much more robust than SurveyMonkey, and it will give us all the data we need, sliced and diced everywhere we want it. But then it would be up to you to determine who you want to send it out to. That consensus process is probably something that should happen here at the stack level, so that you're sending it out to a similar set of folks, so that you can have apples and apples in the same fruit basket. And then after we have that electronic data back, it is our intent to send somebody from the ACS, and this is where the discussion of the public health folks came in earlier, send somebody from the ACS to actually help facilitate a consensus building process. That's the important part, because that's when you learn that the 25 or 40 people in the room don't know, the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing. And so that's where the real strength of the process is. Following that, we, again, in that same group of 40 people or however many you want there, we say, let's develop a list of priorities. Whoever was up here, let's pick the 5 low-hanging fruit and the 5 more difficult, but we know we really need to do. Let's start to develop a strategy, and that will help us focus the team that we will bring in later to do the consultative visit. So we'll have boots on the ground for 2 different processes: to facilitate the BIS and to have a team come in after the BIS and the focus questions have been developed and work with you to create priority recommendations and strategies for moving the process forward. Now, the only time we talked about using the public health students is us sending somebody, 1 or more people, to each of the 22 RACs for the BIS facilitation only, not for the consultation. For the BIS facilitation only is a bit prohibitive in terms of scheduling and in terms of financial commitment from the state. So that's when we thought maybe we could train neutral third-party local folks to go and do the facilitation of the BIS only, just to help achieve consensus in those indicators where half of you scored 1 and the other half scored 5. Does that help a little bit with the process we have in mind? So the difference between what we did there and how we've done BIS, what we're hoping to do with you all and what we did differently previously, is rather than spending a day and a half in the BIS facilitation, we think we can probably get it done in a long day, 8 hour day, so that we can cut down the time commitment and still have the same results at the end. That's the reason to do it electronically.
So some of the effort that we were engaged in was mechanically how to take your questions and adjust them so that we can gather input from our stakeholders who might not be able to be there on that one day to verbally address it. And so that's, I think, what the feedback we have given, to the department with regard to the product that Colin was working on in conjunction with the ACS. Because yes, you want to give it to the regional folks. We were trying to work on, okay, we're going to take that responsibility. How are we going to pull input? And that it was that.
Well, again, I think you can send the survey out to whoever, the BIS out to whomever you want, and hopefully get their answers back. Are they all going to be equally well informed? No, but that's part of the process that we're looking to work through during the facilitation.
And I think that's where we left it with our product development.
And again, I'm not saying the BIS is a perfect tool by any means. It's not. It has its flaws for sure. And I think it can certainly be supplemented if there are specific focused questions that you want. And by the time we get done with the consultative process, the ACS gets done with your consultative process, if we haven't answered your specific needs and your specific questions, then we've failed. And the only way we can answer those questions is if we have some process by which we can know that there are certain similarities that cut across the rural RACs or the urban RACs or whatever, and be the most effective and efficient as we possibly can in answering those questions.
Okay. Everyone, we need to let Colin present at, I don't know, tomorrow? Would you be ready that quick with the document you created, the BIS, with the strikeouts?
That's just what Jane's got up.
That's not what she...
No, I've got a Word document.
Okay. So the BIS document, let's get something clear here. We thought at SETRAC we were going to be the first to be surveyed, so we've done a lot of this mental thinking about this mammoth project. And then the Metroplex, what do you call yourself? RIC-RAC. They understood they were going to be surveyed right after us. And so we've gone through a lot of this thinking. And the BIS tool is mammoth. And I don't care about how much time it's going to take, but you send it out and you're going to get input from a lot of people. Some may not know the answer to the question. It could skew the results because They may not be in the know, where I'm really interested in what the trauma doctors have to say. So we needed a way to slice through this data to also get the answers honed down to, okay, what does this group of constituents say? What do the EMS guys say? And so that's been thought out. And then Colin helped create a document that took out some of the BIS questions that seemed to be like quite alarming, that may not even apply, that just kind of confused everything. So I really think that we need to see the tool, the BIS tool with Colin's strikeouts, and then from that, we've got a survey and we're ready to go.
And for Wanda's piece about that, you have these questions that you don't think are answered, I liked her suggestion of you putting those in that same document so
yeah.
we can review them
That's fine.
together, since they're already separated by domain, you know?
Okay. Well, I just want the process to achieve the end goal of a product that has true utility for all of you. I mean,
Right.
that's just the bottom line here.
We agree.
So let's get there.
Right. Thank you.
So what you got here, Jane?
Well, Eric kept asking about the process and how it was going to work. And the assessments as to who's going to be involved, you've got the College of Surgeons, DISH personnel, grad students from the Schools of Public Health, and the RAC staff and stakeholders. So the concept was that on the first visit to the region, that's going to be for the first two, okay? Daryl and Rick were going to be up first. That the Schools of Public Health, the grad students, and my staff would be there with the American College of Surgeons to come in and really train the grad students on how we were going to go through the BIS assessment. Then the reason they were back to back was to try to conserve some dollars. So it was, the first RAC was going to occur like on a Thursday, Friday. Over the weekend, the surveyors from the college could do some of their report writing. Monday, Tuesday, then the next RAC would go up, and this whole group would be in there doing that assessment piece, okay? From that, then approximately 6 weeks later, and correct me if I misspeak, Nels, approximately 6 weeks later, the college would come back in with their consultative team, and they would use this report to do their consultation in the region. We were going to duplicate that process throughout the other RACs using the graduate students, my staff, and a facilitator to go into the regions to do this very same thing, to repeat it. That report would then be furnished to the college so that when they come back into the region to do their consultative piece, they have a like assessment of that region, okay? Prior to any of the on-site assessments, the plan was to send out the electronic survey. So whether that's the BIS in its current form, in its edited form, in its current form plus something from Texas, the edited form plus something from Texas, whatever, all of that would be done prior to anyone coming to the RAC for the assessment. So that was the thought process. Comments?
And those original dates were the end of this month.
Correct. And part of the reason we pulled back on those dates is because the ACS was trying to get the BIS ready into a survey tool. We were pushing to get the grad students on board through an internship program, and we were coming up on deadlines when things had to be done. Contracts had to be signed. All of this stuff had to be done, and we weren't ready.
When we do it is actually, I don't want to say it's irrelevant, that's fine. If we do this in the summer, that's fine. I actually don't care when we do it. I care about how we do it.
Right.
And when we say electronically, I know it's finally screwed me, I'm wired in now. Now, so you guys have developed something that we can do maybe on a laptop when we're there together.
Or before you get there.
Okay, but not by, in general, I think this population, this group of people here, electronically, widely disseminated, that's going to be to a lot of people. And I don't really think this is going to be as effective by a lot of people. And if we have these questions that we're answering incorrectly because we don't understand the data points, I mean, it was very helpful for you guys to kind of, I don't think you guided us, but without understanding what the question was asking. I mean, like people make millions of dollars writing the SAT and writing tests and questions the right way. So I think with trauma being like we were discussing earlier, it's a unique business, and it has its own peculiarities in each area or state. So I would like to ask if everybody would agree that we could bring those people either together or prior to, but it's your board of directors, or it's your core group, it's your system PI committee, it's whoever is your core group of stakeholders from your region. And it would be good if we could list out who we think in general that is. So, for instance, trauma nurse coordinators from all the lead facilities and rural and urban areas, and trauma surgeons, and emergency physicians, and EMS medical directors, and EMS directors, and right? So that what we do is give everybody in the room from the RACs a structure of expectations. So Danny Updike can go, okay, I got it. The 2 people from Shannon got to be there. I got to get somebody from down there at, Sonora or at Ozona to come up. I got to get 2 guys from San Angelo. I got it now, right? So then they're going to come in and either take that biz beforehand or after. I mean, while you're there, somebody to walk them through. I think those are the burning questions. And if we don't do it that way, I think we're going to end up with a wide disparity in the answering. John?
Eric, I think you bring up probably one of the key points. The BIS, and it's my understanding, I'm not a BIS expert, but it's not designed to be a survey sent out by email, but there's very good methodological reasons why the ACS would want to use that. So I think that was part of the thinking. Okay, so we want to accomplish the ACS goal of being true to that tool because of the methodological reasons, the comparison reasons, the validity reasons, while at the same time realizing it's slightly on the cumbersome side if you don't have somebody with expertise like Dr. Sandel or others to help you with that. And so I think that was the thinking, okay, well, do we ask alternate questions that can also help inform the process? But what I'm hearing from you is that's not a good alternative either.
No, we want to ask the same questions they asked in Ohio. We want to ask the same, we can't compare ourselves to other parts of the country if we don't ask the same questions. If we're Texas, we're important and all, we're not that important. We need to compare ourselves to the other, just San Diego. We need to know what we're, if we're failing, we need to quit acting like we're really good and prove it. That's what I would say. So, we need to ask them. Now, maybe I don't understand this. It's actually a decent question I need to clarify. If we sent it out ahead of time on its own, and I took it at my desk on its own, I wouldn't have anybody from the School of Public Health or from the ACS help me through it, right?
We would be there the next morning just to walk through each of the questions.
So we go back and I'd say I gave this a 1. You'd say, why'd you give that a 1?
Yeah,
Eric?
or
That's
your colleague
terrible. Everybody
across
else
the
gave that
table
a
would
5.
say you're really silly, And then we'd come up with.
The session is a validation of the data you brought forward.
So is there a chance to do some live scoring at the event itself electronically with folks in the crowd?
There's the opportunity to come to consensus and to achieve the median score.
Who showed up?
So there's another piece that I would like to, I don't know if the tool will do this. If I were to ask all of the EMS guys, so I think there's demographic information I'd like to pull out about the perception of the system. I don't know if this is going to make any sense, but we think we do really good at triage in the ER. And the hospitals all go 5. And the EMS guys all go 1. But not just one guy says it, he's wrong. It's like all of the EMS guys. In other words, the demographics of how they answer, who answers what is, I think,
That is what Catherine and Leanne have provided input to try and provide that feedback of who answered in what category.
my point is, if we don't take it individually, and they don't have the individual person who took it, we can't do a consensus answer and go, let's all put up a 3 card or whatever in the audience. I mean, that's not good. That doesn't help us with the other shred out.
The analysis.
That's my new word.
We have always done that in previous BIS facilitations. We have done it more cumbersomely because we had to enter the data from paper demographic information and link it to the particular score. But we've always done that, and we anticipate and fully plan to build out the electronic version in the same way, so you can slice and dice the data any way you want.
So if we have the ability, we have a driving simulator in our region, and we take a pre and a post test, and that test is done individually by people, and we know who got user card, who got number 1, who got number 2, who got number 3. So I would know who answered which questions. But as they take it, and like right then, it's like, okay, number 1, this is what it means, and this is what we're asking. 1. And I know who had that, I don't remember what they're called. Lori, what are they called? Yeah, oh, okay, the little simulator things? I couldn't remember.
Those things
Yeah, those, the widgets. But it allows us to still use the integrity of the biz, but it also that ability also allows us to know who answered to do the correlation after the fact.
We intend to do that.
So you like have those things, right? Like that's in the meeting. Like literally, I would sit here and you would tell me, and I would go, 1, and I would go.
I really don't care if you want to do it in the meeting. I'll tell you why we didn't want to do it in the meeting, and because it's a beat-out day and a half. If you start from ground zero, what we did in all of the paper processes is we went in first thing in the morning, we gave them an orientation, we laid out the ground rules. You can't get a 2 unless you meet all the requirements of a level or of a 1. You can't get a 3 until you meet all the requirements of 1 and 2. You can't, it's not an a la carte menu where you'd say, well, I do a little bit of 2 and some in 5. You got to give us an honest answer. And then we sent them off to their rooms or in the meeting room, and they filled out the thing. We gathered it up, we entered the data, and then we came back in the late afternoon and started building consensus, and the next day we developed priority recommendations. What we would hope by having the tool electronically, we can still do it on site, but we had hoped that maybe by allowing, again, giving them clear instructions and allowing them to do it, let's say the night before, we could reduce the seat time by maybe a half a day. And certainly that would help budget-wise from Texas's perspective and from our perspective.
I will answer that question from Eric's perspective. It's a little bit like taking the SAT, though. I mean, it's pretty right? I mean, it's a 5 or 6 hour grind, and you're right. You have to really read all. It's not just a Likert. It's not as easy as you think it is to answer the questions. You really do have to think through, and you go, I'm worn out. That's like 6 questions. I mean, it's a lot. I remember it now. It's like I erased it. It's like so painful. It's like childbirth, I guess. You guys erased that memory or something. I remember it now. When you just said about the 1 and the 1 and 2, you had to get to 3. I don't think human nature makes me somewhat doubtful. I'm a cynic and an optimist at the same time sometimes. I'm a cynic that people would actually do that well for 4 or 5 hours at home or at the office online. And there's something about peer pressure of everybody looking around the room and seeing everybody still doing it and no one else has shut the laptop and walked off. You're like, I was kind of hoping everybody would revolt by now, but they were still doing it. You'll keep working at it, right? And so although it takes more money, it takes more time in, butts in seats, I mean, there is some value, I think, in the product, the quality of the work product at the end. But I would be curious, a show of hands, who thinks I'm on target with that statement, what I just said, versus who thinks I'm on target with that, given the average knuckle dragging trauma surgeon, knuckle dragging nurse, paramedic. So.
Can I answer the questions while I respond to email? Can I, just.
Right, it's not, right.
So,
Kelly?
I think one of the things we're trying to accomplish here is we're doing a regional assessment. We're not doing an assessment of me as a stakeholder in my facility and Lori as her facility. We want that input into the survey, but we're still doing it from a regional perspective. And I think everybody in the room knows that we're kind of the people that are always at the meeting. Is that there's a core group, like Eric said, a core group of people. There's a lot of explanation for some of these things that needs to be conveyed to our constituent members. So we all know what the intent of the survey is. To get them to participate is going to require hands-on facilitation. If I send this to some of my member hospitals or some of my EMS services, I'm not going to get valid responses because they need some face-to-face explanation.
We're happy to work with you any way you want.
Okay, so I'm going to say this one more time, and I'm not angry, but we need to see the BIS tool that has been modified by Collins so that it's of most use in Texas. If we decide that Collins' ideas are completely wrong, then it will be the exact BIS tool that you guys use nationwide. And quite frankly, I don't care how we compare it to Iowa. I need a tool that's going to help us in Texas. And that's what we used Colin to do when we thought we were going to be one of the first ones out. And the tool needs to be designed so that we can look and see what did EMS say, what did the trauma doc say, what did the level 1 folks have to say, slice and dice this thing using a computer. And I'm just telling you, I'll go with whatever the group comes up with, but this has been well thought out. A lot of work has gone into this, and this is kind of a cluster today. And if we do this again in my market as a cluster, holy cow. I mean, we'll never do it again. This has got to get organized. Any brownies out there?
They're from Colorado.
I'm from Colorado.
Okay, what do we do now? What do we do now?
Go to dinner meeting.
So, how about we take we're done till tomorrow. We're not in the right place.
Well, do we reconvene tomorrow, or do we reconvene at a different time?
Well,
Wanna do it tomorrow?
We gotta start. Just bring the biz tomorrow. We'll go through it. I still have. I agree. So I agree. I agree exactly with my colleague from Houston. That doesn't answer a lot of the other things we were just talking about. Where it's like, okay, now we know what we're going to ask. How are we going to ask it? Are we going to do it? Those are. I mean, they are both valid questions.
How we're going to do that, and we'll look at the biz one.
We can't look at the biz that you have because you're not ready to do it, and we're not ready. We're not in the right mind frame, I think. So my meeting started at 8:30 or 9, and I've been going the whole time. I'm kind of shot mentally. Everybody else seems like we're like bordering on tyranny or something. It just seems like we ought to just take a break and reconvene in the morning. But that's me being a little selfish, probably, because who thinks that's a good idea? So see, a lot of people think that's a.
So just to be clear, though, about what we're going to do tomorrow, what we're hearing is you want to go through, I'll just call it Collins BIS. Go through Collins BIS. Is that what is? I want to be clear because I want to be respectful of y'all's time in the morning. And
That's what Daryl wants to do, and I don't care. So yes.
So okay.
I want to go through I want to go through the tracked changes version of that with the whole biz showing.
So again, I'm sorry, I apologize. Thank you for the microphone. So what we're hearing then is you would like to go through the strike-through BIS of Collins BIS tomorrow. That would be useful for you all. I think there's other comments related about the how, when, what, and where. I'm not sure, Jane, if you all are prepared to do that tomorrow, but And Colin, I'm not sure if you're prepared to go through that list tomorrow, so I'd have to ask you.
I have like 8 different versions on my computer at work that I need to go and actually look at, make copies,
Okay.
et cetera. And then I need to take probably 2 or 3 hours and go through the whole thing and actually
I
read.
definitely think we better break now. It's only 6.
So you're saying you're probably not prepared to do that tomorrow?
Not tomorrow. I mean, I can send all of you the document, sure. We can take a look. That's fine. Constructively, is that gonna look, I mean, if we project that on a PowerPoint, are we going to be able to actually see what we're reading? I mean,
Well, my only frustration with that is I realize there's some coffee or some Red Bull or something involved in that. But Wanda flew in from El Paso. There are people here from all walks of Texas once a quarter, Amarillo. I mean, everybody's here, and we had an ACS. We had this plan to discuss this document or whatever we're doing. I mean, I am sympathetic to that, but at the same time, maybe we postpone it by a couple hours or move it into the after. I don't know when it is tomorrow. When is it tomorrow?
9 to 12.
9?
That's fine, yeah.
So we'll do our best to be responsive to make this happen tomorrow. I think is that the answer?
And so I still have, so what we're going to do, questions versus how we're going to do it. How, not when, not how much the contract, I don't care about that part. How we're going to do it is important to me. Who the stakeholders are going to do. Are we going to do it electronically face-to-face? Are we going to do it electronically beforehand? I think the group needs to participate in deciding that. And I would like to have a sample list of who the best of breed, who we ideally think the best group of people should be taking that. I just sort of named them, but we ought to write that down so people can walk out going, who really from your trauma system should participate? How are they going to do that? They're going to show up in a room and someone's going to walk them through it for 8 or 9 hours, and it's going to be pretty painful. And the next day they're going to go through it, and by the end of it they're going to feel really great. You're probably going to need to have a dinner. We did dinner just out of penance. I mean, we kind of felt guilty. We took them to, I don't know, it was Brazilian dollars. We took them downtown and ate big. Those are the things we need to, those are things that the RACs all need to understand so they understand what they're signing up for. I think. Yeah, can you pay for that out of trauma or grant dollars or HB? Danny?
Yeah, and I agree here, because, in my area, if I'm gonna have to get a trauma surgeon to not schedule any cases.
For a whole day.
Give up a whole day or two.
Right.
Schedule what he doesn't have to give up, that's gonna take some work with planning for a long time.
Right, and maybe we're okay with certain people offside, onside, whatever. I mean, now we're talking about how we're going to do it. And if we don't really coalesce around how we're going to do it I swear to God, if we do it 22 different ways with the exact same questions, but we did it in different methodologies, I'm going to lose my mind. Because if we come back and say, well, we didn't even know we were supposed to give that to the trauma surgeons. We didn't even do it. It's like, oh my God, we've missed so we have to coalesce around how, as much as what we're taking, what questions we're taking are important, but as important is how we're going to do it. And I swear we're going to blow this if we're not careful. And by the time we all argue and cuss and discuss and come up with that plan, it's going to look really organized, Darryl. By the time we come down there, we'll look like pros.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Apley? So 2 questions. One is I think the idea was to have that coalescing, so it's not being done 22 different ways. So I think that was the intent all along. So that's more of a comment than a question. So, but the question is, we have 3 hours scheduled for tomorrow. You talked about the how and the what. That's a lot to do in 3 hours. So what would be most valuable for you all to do tomorrow for that 3 hours? Because I'm struggling to making sure that we're responsive to what you all are requesting, but also realizing there are some time limitations because of other reasons built in. So
I can see a follow-up, maybe conference call happening down the road if necessary. But I think figuring out what questions and making sure that we're good with the groups. I mean, I've never been through this process before, but just thinking about it, from, like, thinking about our RAC area, one thing that could possibly, and they're right about the trauma docs, getting them to come, but one thing to do was, like Christine was talking about, you use the electronic version, bring them all in a room, like we could use the Health Science Center, the A&M Health Science Center. You're going through, everybody is assigned their little keypad to put in 1 through 5, and they're assigned it. You put down whatever number it is to the question, and then it pops up with the average, and then you talk about what does that mean.
Right, absolutely. So we have an hour left tonight. We should answer Eric's question. I think the people in the room are here who can decide who is our target audience to do the assessments. I think that we should be able to call it, I don't even care if it's pretty. It doesn't have to be pretty. It can be in like 9 different colors tomorrow.
That's fine, yeah.
The biz, it doesn't have to be perfect. We'll know it's misspelled, whatever. It's in 9 colors. But it's the information for us to discuss. There's no reason why we shouldn't be able to use both of these times to accomplish what both Eric and Daryl have mentioned.
So let me make sure with the other folks, we've got about an hour left. We can move forward with the kind of the how piece and get feedback on that. Again, not necessarily making decisions, but getting feedback on what you all think is important and how you would recommend that would take place. I think in regard to San Antonio, the one thing that you would probably want to consider is, or using the Health Science Center, is not all the RACs are going to be have the same types of facilities. So what comments we give today, I think, need to be, keep that in mind, because again, you don't want to necessarily do it different ways in each different RAC. So if y'all would like to use the remaining time to kind of get to the how, then tomorrow when we come in, we can do the what. I will say one comment related to the what and the BIS, and Eric will know this, and others who have looked at this. It's very detailed, so the expectation that we would get through all the BIS statements tomorrow would probably be a high expectation that could not be met, but I think we can make some very good progress through it just because they're meaty, for lack of a better word. So if your desire for the rest of the hour is to talk about the how, then I think we can do that.
My desire for the rest of the hour is to have a margarita.
Not sure if I can grant that request for you, but
I don't think I mean, the group, so John, I do this a lot with these people. This is the look of anarchy. That's what you look out there and see.
Well, no, this was
start doing a
Christine's
lot of
request,
head
so I
bobbing
just
and
wanted
stuff.
to
At
make
first,
sure.
they're very calm, but when the head bobbing starts and they get kind of finicky, we're in a.
So do you all want to continue this evening? Raise your hand.
Who thinks we should plow forward for another hour and figure out how to do the survey? Raise your hand. Who thinks we should regroup, talk about this tonight over several tacos, and discuss how this could work in the morning, and come in together and work on how we're going to do it, what the target audiences are, how we would do that in each region, how that will work in small and large RACs, and then maybe get into some of the questions and understand that, and then do a follow-on conference call with the rest of the questions.
Is that the one that gets us out of here?
Okay, meeting adjourned then. Meeting adjourned. Thank you. Thank you all for your time, and thank you for the feedback. This is very helpful.